And it is 8 o'clock. So I am going to begin. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Welcome to the very first ever Science of Sport quiz. Tonight is a sports theme because that's what I know best. This is going to, I hope, be a regular thing. I don't know where in the world you are, whether you're in the UK, the US, some of you might be very early mornings to the east, I'm not sure, but thanks for tuning in. I hope that you are sane and most of all healthy wherever it is that you are. So this quiz is basically my way of dealing with sports withdrawal symptoms. It's been about a month now that there hasn't been any, and I've tried to watch highlights and reruns, can't get into it. I've tried to watch these virtual things they're doing. I can't. Maybe in time I will. But anyway, this is my way to do this. So I'm going to commit that as long as this lockdown continues, there will be one quiz like this every single week. So I hope that we can grow it, and you'll join me for more entertaining evenings as we all stuck in our homes without sport to watch. So tonight I'm going to get straight into it because you're not here to listen to me natter about the lockdown. This is escapism. I've got for you 40 questions in 8 different categories on sport. So 5 questions per category. I've tried to cover as many sports as I can. In preparing the quiz, I discovered that you could ask someone who knows a lot about football and they say too easy, and then you ask them a tennis question, too difficult. So I've tried to cover a spectrum. I've tried to cover US sports, European sports, Southern Hemisphere sports, you name it, winter sports even in there as well, even though I know next to nothing about them. And I'm going to go through them. The way it'll work is I will read to you the questions twice each, and then after 10, so that's 2 rounds, I'll give you answers to the previous 2. So you can keep track of your own answers. Obviously, I would, normal circumstances at a pub quiz, maybe you'd have people marking, or you'd have a person collecting the answers, marking them. Obviously, I can't do that. Neither can I check that you're not using Google and getting on the line to look up these answers. So basically, I'm the quiz equivalent of an anti-doping agency during lockdown. I just have to ask you to please don't cheat, not cheat, and pinky swear that you'll play by the rules. So, hello everyone on the chat room. If you do need to say anything to me, say it on the chat room. I'll do my best to keep track of that while I'm hitting you with questions. We've got some people from Cambridge, Latvia. I always wanted to go there. Joburg, how's it, Neil? Hanover, Germany. Welcome everyone. Going to get straight into it. So, is anything I haven't said to you? So yes, I'm going to give you the answers. You mark it yourselves, whether you're playing in groups and so forth. It's up to you to deal with that. So without further ado, let us begin.
For the thousands in attendance and the millions watching around the world on HBO pay-per-view, ladies and gentlemen, from Mandalay Bay, Las Vegas, let's get ready to rumble! Now,
having a bit of fun there. So, am I wearing vaporflies? No, Matthew, I'm not. I'm barefoot in my home. Round number 1. So round number 1, the first 2 rounds actually are who am I's. So I'm going to give you some clues to famous athletes or people and ask you who they are. So you have to identify them. Just a note on the questions. I've been to pub quizzes where you'll get asked the question and you don't know the answer, and then you're basically out of the game, completely disengaged. I've tried to set questions where even if you don't know, you can still think about it, maybe logic your way towards some kind of guess, even if it's not correct. So in that vein, a number of my questions have multiple answers. So for instance, I might ask you about a player's name and the team they play for, or an Olympic legend and which Olympic games they won their medals in, or something like that. So listen carefully to the questions. As I said, I will read it out slowly, once, then again, and then move on to the next question. So round number 1 is sporting heroes. Question 1. Easy ones to start you. Which gymnast scored the first perfect 10 on the uneven bars and then followed it up with 6 more perfect scores? And for a bonus point, in which Olympic Games did this occur? Question 1. which gymnast scored the first perfect 10 on the uneven bars and then followed it up with 6 more perfect scores to become an Olympic legend? And for a bonus point, in which Olympic Games did this occur? Folks, there's a chat box on the right, and you're welcome to type your answers in there, but then everyone else can see it too. So I'd rather you didn't. These are for you. So write it down on a piece of paper or something, and I'll give you the answers in a moment. Question 2. I was the coach of the Japan rugby team when they pulled off a huge upset to beat South Africa in the 2015 Rugby World Cup. Who am I? And who was coaching South Africa on that occasion? Paul, I don't want to block the comments because I do want to see what folks have to say while the quiz is going in case something comes up that's important. So I'm rather asking people to just hold the answers to themselves, or you can hide the comments, I think, yourself. So go ahead and do that. Here's question 2 again. I was the coach of the Japan rugby team when they pulled off a huge upset to beat South Africa in the 2015 Rugby World Cup. Who am I? And who was coaching South Africa on that occasion? Question 3. I think I've graded them so they get a bit more difficult. I reached a record 12 Wimbledon finals, 9 of them consecutively. I won 9 of those 12 finals and hold the Open era record for titles at a single Grand Slam. Who am I? And for a second point, on 5 of those 9 occasions, I beat the same rival from the USA. Who was she? I reached a record 12 Wimbledon finals, 9 of them consecutively. I won 9 of those finals to hold the Open era record for titles at a single Grand Slam. Who am I? And your second point, on 5 of those 9 occasions, I beat a rival from the USA. Who was she? Question 4. Unlike most other Olympic legends, we attained hero status and became crowd favorites because of our very disastrous performances in our respective events. One of us was a ski jumper in 1988, and one of us was a swimmer in the 2000 Olympic Games. Who are we? 2 points, 2 names I'm looking for. Here's that question again, number 4. Unlike most Olympic legends, we attained hero status and became crowd favorites for our disastrous performances in our respective events. One of us was a ski jumper in the 1988 Winter Olympics, and the other was a swimmer in the 2000 Sydney Olympics. Who are we? And your final question for heroes. I became the first of many East African Olympic champions when I won gold medals in the 1960 and 64 Olympic marathons in Rome and Tokyo. Who am I? And who was my shoe sponsor for the 1960 gold medal win? Question 5 again. I became the first of many East African distance running Olympic champions when I won gold medals in the marathon in the 1960 and 64 Olympic Games? Who am I? And second point, who was my shoe sponsor for the 1960 Olympic gold medal win? That last question's a running one. I think Jay will get that. Welcome, Jay, from Northern California. It's good to hear from you. Hope you're well. Right, we now move on to round number 2, where we switch from heroes to villains.
I'm on my knees, forgive me, please. I've been a bad boy.
Question number 1. Yes, those clubs are very old. It's been a long time since I played a good game of golf. Question number 1, villains. Easy one to start. I see some people are saying these are too difficult. I'm sorry, but I hope you improve. Number 1, I am a prolific goal scorer with a cabinet full of trophies, but I am also notorious for sinking my teeth into opponents 3 times. Who am I? And which country do I play for? George C. says, we want the swimmer's last name. Yes, on that previous question about the Olympic heroes for their very disastrous performances when they finished stone last, you can give me their names or you can give me their nicknames. I'm in a generous mood tonight, so either one works. Thanks for the question, George. Right, question 1 of villains. Just again, I'm a prolific goal scorer with a cabinet full of trophies, but I'm notorious for sinking my teeth into my opponents. Who am I, and which country do I play for? Question 2. I was the number 1 player in the world in my sport when a crazed fan of my biggest rival ran in from the crowd and stabbed me between the shoulder blades while I was playing a match. Who am I? And who was my rival whose fan committed the act? I was the number 1 player in the world in my sport when a crazed fan of my biggest rival ran in from the crowd and stabbed me between the shoulder blades while I was playing a match. Who am I? And who was the rival whose fan committed the act? Question 3, villains. We were implicated in 2 major cheating scandals in the NFL. One was called Spygate, the other was called Deflategate. Who are we? And who is our famous coach? 2 points. Here it is again, question 3. We were implicated in 2 major cheating scandals in the NFL. One was called Spygate, the other was called Deflategate. Who are we? And who is our famous coach? Hopefully a bit easier on the villains. It's always easy to remember the bad guys. Number 4. I had part of my ear bitten off during a world title fight in 1997. It was initially billed Sound and the Fury and is now known as Bite Fight. Who am I? And who was my opponent? Here's question 4. I had part of my ear bitten off during a world title fight in 1997. It was initially billed Sound and the Fury and is now known as the Bite Fight. Who am I? And who was my biting opponent in that bout? D, I don't know who the Dylan Panthers are. Actually, I do. They're from Friday Night Lights, aren't they? But no, that's not the answer, D. Question 5. In 1994, I was implicated in a plot to assault my biggest rival, to break her leg in order to prevent her from competing in the upcoming US Championships. I eventually pleaded guilty to conspiracy to hinder prosecution and was banned for life as a result of being involved prior to the incident. Who am I? And who was my rival victim? In 1994, I was implicated in a plot to assault my biggest rival and break her leg to prevent her from competing in the US Championships. I eventually pleaded guilty to conspiracy to hinder prosecution, but I was banned for life as a result of being involved prior to the incident. Who am I? And who was my rival victim? Eric says, what does it say if you know more, if you know your villains better than your heroes? It says that you're realistic about sport. Let's not go there. I wanted to have a whole category on dopers, but I decided not to. That is your first batch of 10 questions. I'm going to give you a minute or so to confer, to discuss, to think about any of them. If you need any repeated, send me a chat in the live chat here, and I will go back over them. And then in a minute from now, you will hear the gong, which signals an end, and to the first 2 rounds, and I will give you some answers. Villains were too easy. Well, heroes were too difficult, so it's all about balance. Could have made it more difficult, I suppose, but there you go. I did choose some notorious incidents, I suppose, so they would have been headlines at the time. Always a little easier, I guess. Thanks for joining, Maria. All right, folks, 30 seconds, and then I'm going to give you some answers. And the gong says time is up, which means we are going to go to some answers. Sorry, Austin, I just saw your comment now, but I'm going to go ahead and give the answers to this. You'll hear the question when I do those. Question number 1 I asked you was the gymnast who scored the first perfect 10, and I also wanted to know which Olympic Games it was in. It was, of course, Nadia Comaneci, and it was in the 1976 Olympic Games, which were in Montreal. So if you named Comaneci and either Montreal or 1976, 2 points. Question 2, I asked you who was the coach of Japan when they beat South Africa, and also wanted to know who the South African coach was. They were, of course, Eddie Jones, now with England, and Heineke Meyer was the South African coach. Third, I asked you about a tennis player who'd reached 12 Wimbledon finals, 9 of them consecutively. I won 9 of those, including 5 victories over the same opponent. I wanted you to name that player, and the player, of course, is Martina Navratilova. And the American rival who she beat on 5 occasions of those 9 finals was Chris Evert, or Chris Evert Lloyd. Well done if you got both of those. Question 4. I asked you about two Olympic legends who became heroes and crowd favorites because they finished stone last in their events. One of them, in fact, is the subject of a movie. That person, of course, was your ski jumper from 1988. It was Michael Edwards, who is better known as Eddie the Eagle. And then the 2000 Sydney Olympic swimmer was Eric Musambani from Equatorial Guinea, better known as Eric the Eel. Have a look on YouTube and you'll find some footage of them performing in those events. Eric the Eel actually knocked more than a minute off his 100-meter freestyle time. He ended up being a half-decent swimmer. So his story began in Sydney and got better. And then the final question I asked you was, I became the first of many East African Olympic champions by winning the marathons in 1960 and 64. That was, of course, Ethiopian legend Abebe Bikila. The second question I asked you was, who was the shoe sponsor for his 1960 win? That was, of course, a trick question because he ran that marathon barefoot. He's one of the poster boys or the legends of barefoot running. He ran in shoes in 1964. Those were Pumas. But if you'd said barefoot, you would have got the second point there. Right, so that was heroes. I know that some people said it was difficult. I hope now that you've heard the answers, you're going, I knew that. Villains, prolific goal scorer with a cabinet full of trophies, but notorious for biting my opponents. That was Luis Suarez, and the country I play for is Uruguay. Club Barcelona, country Uruguay. Number one player in the world who was stabbed between the shoulder blades while playing was Monica Seles. She made a comeback eventually, but I think it took her about 2 years to get back into the game after that. And the person who stabbed her was a German fan of her big rival, Steffi Graf. So that would have got you the second point. The answer was Steffi Graf. She was playing a match in Hamburg when a guy whose name was Gunther something or other, I think, I forget now, ran onto the court and stabbed her. Question 3, football team, NFL team that was implicated in cheating in the NFL. One was Spygate, the other was Deflategate. That team, of course, is the New England Patriots. And the coach was Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick is Bill Belichick, I guess. Number 4, I had part of my ear bitten off during a world title fight in 1997. Who am I? That, of course, is Evander Holyfield. And the notorious biter was Mike Tyson. Maybe an easy question there. 2 bonus marks I gave you. 2 freebies. Question 5. In 1994, I was implicated in a plot to assault my biggest rival, break her leg. That person, of course, was Tonya Harding, also the subject of a movie called, I think, I, Tonya, where she was played by Margot Robbie. And the rival whose legs she was involved in trying to break was Nancy Kerrigan, who then obviously didn't compete in the US Champs. Harding won those US Championships, but had the title stripped from her. Kerrigan went on to win the Olympic silver medal that year. So there you go. That was villains. Couple of requests here. Renee says, repeat the answers for heroes 1 and 2. Number 1, Nadia Comaneci, Montreal, 1976. And number 2, the Japan coach was Eddie Jones. The South Africa coach was Heineke Meyer. Feel free to Gunther Pasch. I said I got Gunther, so you'll give me that. And Monica Seles. You got that one. Well done, Austin. 10 for heroes was the maximum score. 10 for villains. See a couple of people. There's a 6. Eddie the Eagle counts. That's fine. I'll give it to you, Gina. Well done if you got, well, 20. Our next round is sports science. I got to tell you, this was by far the most difficult round to come up with questions for, because I kept coming up with these questions and then running them by people, and they looked at me like I was speaking Latin, which sometimes I was, as you will shortly discover. So I don't know if I've pitched this sports science questions correctly. It's out of 9, and so you are about to hear the sports science round. So for a while, I
things I learned.
Question number 1. 1 mark. What are the gastrocnemius and semitendinosus examples of? What are gastrocnemius and semitendinosus examples of? Question number 2, also for 1 point. If you have sustained a navicular stress fracture, which body part have you injured? Austin is, a sports physician, is laughing at the simplicity of these. If you have sustained a navicular stress fracture, which body part have you injured? The answer to these questions, by the way, if you listen to my podcast, and yes, this is a blatant punt for my podcast. It's called The Real Science of Sport. But the answers to some of these questions will have been heard in that podcast. So if you are a regular listener, you are in the money, especially this next question. Richard is awake. Just wake up, Rich. Question number 3, sports science. The female athletic triad is characterized by menstrual dysfunction, low energy availability, and what other condition? For 1 mark. Did a whole podcast on this last year. Mary Kane, who was being coached by the now banned Alberto Salazar, came out and we did a podcast covering this. Here it is again. The female athletic triad is characterized by menstrual dysfunction, low energy availability, and what other condition? Question number 4 for 3 points. When scientists are measuring endurance capabilities in athletes, we measure something called a VO2 max, which is basically how much oxygen your body can consume per minute. So that's what VO2 max is. What I want you to do is rank these 3 animals from highest to lowest. Highest VO2 max to lowest VO2 max. They are dog, horse, human. Dog, horse, human. Rank those 3 from highest VO2 max to lowest VO2 max per kilogram. So it's per kilogram body mass, right? So just because you're the biggest doesn't mean you have to have the highest VO2. They are dog, horse, human. Which of those 3 relative, so relative to body weight, someone's just asked again, so I can't stress that enough. Relative to body weight, dog, horse, human. Which one has the highest, then medium, then lowest VO2 max? Which breed? My followers are pedants. Good question though. Which breed? The athletic breed, not bulldogs. Not bulldogs. The athletic breed, the huskies. Hopefully you got that question. I'm sorry it's technical, but it is sports science. Indulge me. Rank these animals from highest to lowest VO2 max. Dog, horse, human. And then question number 5. Question number 5. Your doping question, couldn't get away with it entirely. Endurance athletes will dope by trying to increase how much oxygen they can get to the muscles and around the body. For 3 points, what specific part of the blood carries the oxygen? What specific part of the blood carries the oxygen? And number 2, which 2 illegal methods do athletes use to elevate the levels of that oxygen carrier? You'll be pleased to know that this is the final sports science question. I'll say the last one to you again. Endurance athletes dope by trying to increase how much oxygen they can get to the muscles and then around the body. For 3 points, what is the specific part of the blood that carries the oxygen? And number 2 is, which 2 illegal methods are most commonly used to elevate the levels of that oxygen carrier? People are asking, is it a super athlete? Is the athlete Kilian Jornet? The athlete can be anyone you want because it won't change the answer to that question about dogs, horses, and humans. So go with anything you'd like. You can make it a Tour de France champion on bags of the answer to question 5, and you will be fine. Right, your next round is famous quotes, and we're going to try and have a little bit of fun here, so I hope this works. I'm going to play you a couple of quotes on my computer, and you have to identify who they are. So there's a few like that, some I'll read to you, but the first one, so turn up your computers because you will need to listen to the sound coming from them. I mean, obviously you're listening to me, but just in case the volume's a bit low. Here's your first one for famous quotes in sport. What I want to know here, please, is what is the name of the actor and what is the name of the movie for 2 points. Actor, movie. Here's number 1 coming now.
That voice just now, what was it?
We didn't hear anything.
If you build it, he will come.
Okay, you must have heard that.
I want the name of the actor and I want the name of the movie that you've just heard. I'm going to play it for you one more time. Here it comes.
Voice just now, what was it?
We didn't hear anything.
If you build it, he will come.
Okay, you must have heard that.
Right, there you go. So I want the name of the actor whose voice you've just heard, and I want the name of the movie if that you've just heard from that. Thanks, Maria. I've been quite anxious about the sound, so I'm pleased to hear that the sound is working fine there. Question 2, famous quotes. For 1 point, easy one. I want you to tell me who said the following words. It's hard to be humble when you're as great as I am. Sports people said Donald Trump is not a valid answer. That quote again. It's hard to be humble when you're as great as I am. Question number 3. I'm about to play you another clip. I'm afraid I'm not acting out anything for you. Yeah, that's not a skill set I have any of. Question number 3. I'm about to play you another clip. I want you to give me for 2 points. Which cyclist said these words? 1. And who is he talking about for 2? Here it comes. I'll play it twice.
I think she'd be okay with me saying this, but I'm going to take the liberty to say it.
and I said, listen, I called you crazy. I called you a bitch. I called you all these things, but I never called you fat. Because that's one of the things she thought I said you were fat, crazy bitch. And I said, bitch, I never said you were fat.
Here comes that clip again. So I want to know the name of the cyclist who said these words, and I want to know who he was talking about for the second point.
I think she'd be okay with me saying this, but I'm going to take the liberty to say it. And I said, listen, I called you crazy. I called you a bitch. I called you all these things, but I never called you fat. Because that's one of the things she thought I said you were fat, crazy bitch. And I said, bitch, I never said you were fat. This is what.
There you go. That's number 3. Question number 4 for 2 points. Which enigmatic footballer said the following words to the media after he won an appeal against a 2-week prison sentence? So again, which enigmatic footballer said these words to the media after winning an appeal against a 2-week prison sentence? The quote is, and I'm not doing accents, "When the seagulls follow the trawler, it's because they think sardines will be thrown into the sea. Thank you very much." When the seagulls follow the trawler, it's because they think sardines will be thrown into the sea. Thank you very much. Who said those words after winning an appeal against a 2-week prison sentence? And your second point is I want to know what the prison sentence was originally given to him for. What was the prison sentence given to him for? And then your final question, and for that we are going to listen to another clip. I chose this for myself, really. I like this clip. What I want you to do here, again, same as the first one. I want from you the name of the actor, and I want the name of the movie. This is quite a lengthy one. I'm going to play it out in its, well, not entirety, but I'll play it for about a minute, and then I will give you 2 minutes to wrap up rounds 3 and 4, and I will come back and give you some answers. Right now, I'm going to go grab another drink from the fridge. Here's the clip. I want the actor and the movie.
Oh, if I'm going to have any life anymore, it's because I'm still willing to fight and die for that itch. Because that's what living is. The 6 inches in front of your face. Now, I can't make you do it. You got to look at the guy next to you. Look into his eyes. Now, I think you're going to see a guy who will go that inch with you. You're going to see a guy who will sacrifice himself for this team because he knows when it comes down to it, you're going to do the same for him. That's a team, gentlemen. And either we heal now as a team, or we will die as individuals. That's football, guys. That's all it is. Now, what are you going to do?
There you go. Not a person who's played a team sport in the world who hasn't seen that clip a few times. The Americans sure do know how to write a good motivational speech. So that is the end of Sports Science and Famous Quotes. One was difficult. I hope the second part was a little bit easier. If you do have requests for questions that you'd like repeated, pop them in the chat box and I'll come to them. And other than that, I'm going to give you 1 minute. 1 minute, and then I will come back to you with some answers for those 2 rounds. Right, when the gong sounds, the answers begin. Inspired by the Rugby World Cup in Japan. Right, answers. Sports science. The first question, I asked you what the gastrocnemius and semitendinosus are examples of. They are, of course, muscles. If you said muscles of the leg, fine. If you were being fancy and try to say something like biarticulate muscles, then this is not an anatomy test, it's a quiz. So you're right, but it's muscles. If you have sustained a stress fracture of the navicular, which body part is injured? Is the foot. It's a bone in the foot. So that's 2. The female triad, the female athletic triad, is characterized by menstrual dysfunction, low energy availability, and which other condition is low bone, let me try that again, low bone mineral density, a precursor towards potential osteoporosis. Again, listen to the podcast, you'd have known that. So it's menstrual dysfunction, low energy availability, and low bone mineral density. I gave you a list of 3 animals, and I wanted you to rank them from highest to lowest VO2 max, which is how much oxygen they are able to consume per minute per kilogram. I did specify that. So I inadvertently read the answer in the order that they were actually meant to be in, because the highest VO2 max belongs to dogs, obviously not your bulldog, but the sled dogs, the huskies that compete, for instance, in the Iditarod, have been measured with VO2 max values approaching 250 to 300 milliliters per kilogram per minute. Horses are second. Their VO2 max in thoroughbred racehorses is between 150 and 200, and humans are third or lowest, between 30 and 90. And even the superhuman is not even at 1/2 of what an elite racehorse and 1/3 of what an elite sled dog achieves. So the answer was dogs highest, horses second, humans third. Then finally, your doping question. Endurance athletes dope by trying to increase oxygen. The specific part of the blood that carries the oxygen, I'll give you red blood cells or hemoglobin. So it's the hemoglobin on that red blood cell for 1 mark. And then a second 2 marks, which illegal methods? This has been the story of endurance sport for the last maybe 30 years, is EPO use. So that's erythropoietin. That's a drug that they use to stimulate red blood cell production, or straight up simple blood doping, which goes back to the 70s. The Finns were using it. That's where you take blood out and then put it back in. So that's the answer there. EPO and blood doping. Indeed, dogs rule, Austin. Famous quotes. The first clip that I played you, let me just go back to that. I'll play you the key bit. Try and find that key bit. Famous quote.
If you build it, he will come.
If you build it, he will come. That, of course, is a famous line from the movie Field of Dreams, and the actor is Kevin Costner. So well done if you got both of those. Number 2, it's hard to be humble when you're as great as I am. That is Muhammad Ali. Who else? I am the greatest. I mean, I suppose it could be many athletes, but hopefully you got the great reference. Then the next bit that I played you was this confession from one Lance Armstrong, in which he defended not having called someone fat. So it was obviously Lance. That was in his Oprah Winfrey interview when he came out and confirmed what people should have known for years. And the person he was talking about was Betsy Andreu. She was the wife of his former teammate, Frankie. And she was one of the people who was initially a whistleblower and a very strident critic of Armstrong's, because she heard him confess to using drugs in a hospital room, blah, blah, blah. You can look up the story. So that's who that was. Lance Armstrong, Betsy Andreu. When the seagulls follow the trawler, it's because they think sardines will be thrown into the sea. If I backed myself, I would have done that in a French accent, because that was Eric Cantona speaking. And he was saying that to the media after he won an appeal against a 2-week prison sentence. That 2-week prison sentence was for the incident when he launched himself into the spectators at Selhurst Park and he kung fu kicked a guy who'd been giving him abuse. Very famous incident in English football from the 1990s. And I don't know what he was talking about, Seagulls. It's not the craziest thing he said. He gave a speech, I think it was at the the Ballon d'Or, or the World Football of the Year thing, which was even crazier. So that's the guy. And then the very final one you heard there, I played you a long segment of it. One of the great sporting movies was Any Given Sunday. So that was the movie, Any Given Sunday. And the actor who you heard giving the Game of Inches speech, famous concept now, was Al Pacino. So Al Pacino, Any Given Sunday. On we go with our next round, which is going to be world rankings.
We are number 1. We are the number 2. A little bit loud and 3. I still can't hear you. We are number 1.
Right. We are number 1. Who is number 1? The first question. Who is the current men's and women's number 1 ranked football teams on the FIFA World Rankings? Who are currently the number 1 ranked men's and women's football teams in the FIFA World Rankings? See some scores coming through. 15, that would be out of 18 for those two. Sports Science was 9. Famous Quotes was 9. So 15 out of 18. Good effort. 17 out of 18. Well done, Eric. Question number 2 for rankings. I want you to rank the following 4 teams in order from most to fewest English Premier League titles between 1889 and 2019. So 1889 to 2019, rank the following 4 teams from most to fewest English League titles. Manchester United, Liverpool, Chelsea, Tottenham. Manchester United, Liverpool, Chelsea, Tottenham. Victor asked national teams. Yes, according to the FIFA World Rankings, which are for national teams, who are the number 1 men's and women's teams at the moment? That's question 1. Question number 3 is for 1 mark only. In the women's golf world rankings, 1 country has got 4 players in the top 10 and 8 in the top 20. Which country is it? In the women's golf world rankings, there is a country that has 4 players in the world's top 10 and 8 in the world's top 20. Which country is that? I want to say hello to Michelle, who is listening to this in Shetland, while her husband James is listening in Glasgow. I hope that's not a situation for the whole of lockdown and that you guys can get together at some point soon, or that lockdown ends earlier for you. But thanks for playing. Hope you are doing well as a team, James and Michelle. Question number 4. 2 marks. Prior to Roger Federer, which player spent the most time at the world number 1 position in the men's tennis rankings? And who currently lies 3rd on that list behind Federer and that person? I'll say that again. Prior to Roger Federer, which player spent the most time at world number 1 in the men's tennis rankings? And who is currently 3rd on that list behind Roger Federer and that person? In fact, had it not been for the cancellation, no, let me not say any more about that. Never mind. I'll tell you that when I give you the answers. And your final question for world rankings. I debated whether to include this. I'm not a massive fan of these sports, but this one is better than the car equivalent, which to me is more about the car than the athlete, much like marathon running is becoming more about the shoe. But enough about that. Number 5, who is the motorcycle champion who has finished on top of the MotoGP standings 6 times, including the last 4 consecutively? And what motorbike manufacturer does he ride? Well, James, in that case, I do hope that your lockdown ends soon, although I was watching today that they're extending it, so I think we're in the same boat. But the quiz will be weekly. Weekly we'll do this, so we'll reconcile and get together like this once a week at least. Number 5 again, I'll just read it to you one more time. Who is the motorcycle champion who has finished on top of the MotoGP standings 6 times, including the last 4 consecutively? And what motorbike manufacturer does he ride? That's why I didn't want to include it, Mark, but I felt pressured from people I know who do enjoy it. I drew the line at Formula One, though, because that's where those guys who ride those motorbikes, though, they're serious athletes. I've got mad respect for what they do. Right, that's world rankings in the bag. That's for 11 marks, that round. I will come to the answers in a while. But first, we move on to sporting venues and a trip. Question number 1. If you are watching the Knicks play basketball at their home venue, which city are you in? And what is the name of the venue? So we've kicked off an argument about the status of motorsport as a sport. That was not my intention. I think that they are incredible athletes, but I'm still not madly into it. Question number 1 for sporting venues. I'm going to get abused for that. If you are watching the Knicks play basketball at their home venue, which city are you in? And for your second point, what is the name of that menu? Hello also to Dean from Michael. I hope you guys are playing, you're putting your minds together, or you're competing against one another. Either way, I hope you're going well. Question number 2 for sporting venues. We're staying in New York. There's a free mark for you. My bad. Sorry about that. Sorry. Question number 2. What is the name of the park or the facility that hosts the US Open tennis tournament every year? And what is the name of its biggest stadium? What is the name of the park or facility that hosts the US Open tennis tournament every year? And what is the name of its biggest stadium? For 2 marks. Oops. Question 3, sporting venues. Not menus, Austin, venues. In which city would you be if you were at Eden Gardens attending a sports event? And what sport would you most likely be watching? In which city would you be if you were at Eden Gardens attending a sports event? And what sport would you be most likely to be watching? Question 4, sporting venues. The iconic Rumble in the Jungle bout took place in which African country and city? The iconic Rumble in the Jungle boxing bout took place in which African country and city? And your final question for sporting venues. Name the 2 countries who hosted the first Football World Cup final and Rugby World Cup final. Name the countries who hosted the first Football World Cup final and the first Rugby World Cup final. So it's 2 answers, it's not the same country. I realized that I might have confused that in my wording of that question. I'm looking for the name of the country who hosted the first Football World Cup final and the name of the country that hosted the first Rugby World Cup final. You have 1 minute before the gong signals the end of round 6. Thanks, Nicholas. Glad you could play. Hope you're having a good time. What do you mean 1 right there, synergy coaching? I'd hope you've got a lot more than just 1 right. Did I say menu? I'm sorry. I hope you got sporting venues out of that eventually. Connect the clues and figure out what I was actually asking about. 30 seconds, folks. Then I'm going to give you some answers to this round, these 2 rounds. Good stuff, Derek. The last round is the Olympics, and it's a mega round, 25 points, between the last 2 rounds anyway. So there's lots of time for comeback still. And the gong tells me that round 6 is now complete, which means I'm going to give you some answers. First of all, for world rankings. Finn, it's just a sprite. I had a lunch today, and I'm trying to not overdo it in lockdown. We're not allowed to buy any alcohol here in South Africa during lockdown, and there's every chance lockdown will be extended for another week or 2. So I'm having to use a pacing strategy to make it to the end of this unknown finish line. So I'm on the sprites. Question number 1 for world ranking was the current number 1 men's and women's football teams. I'll give you the women's one because I think that's a little more obvious. It's the USA. Of course, they won the title, the World Cup last year. A very famous, dominant team in the history of women's football. The men's one is a little less obvious. You may not have guessed this, but the answer is in fact Belgium. Belgium are currently the number 1 ranked men's team in the world. I then gave you 4 Premier League English teams, and I wanted you to rank them from most to fewest. The answer for most is Manchester United, followed by Liverpool. I think they're 2 behind, and it was going to be 1 at the end of this year, but who knows? Who knows? They needed 2 more matches, I think, to seal that title, and that would have been 1 behind. So Man United, Liverpool. 3rd are Chelsea, and then Tottenham. So Man United, Liverpool, Chelsea, Tottenham would have got you 4 points, 1 for each one you got correct position there. Then I asked you about the women's golf world rankings and which country has got 8 of the top 20 and 4 in the top 10. The answer is South Korea. They've always been a fairly dominant force in women's golf, and that's true today also, with 40% of the world's top 10 and top 20. Question number 4 was a tennis question in which I asked you about which player spent the most time at world number 1 before Roger Federer. That player was Pete Sampras. And the person who's 3rd, so it goes Federer, Sampras, and then the guy who's next is Novak Djokovic. who is, I think, 4 weeks behind Sampras. I think it's, if memory serves me, 286 versus 282 or something in those ranges, which means that Djokovic probably, given that we were going to be in the hard court swing of the US, would have had a good chance of getting there and holding that to be second. But lockdown has denied him of that, just as it's denied me the chance to go running. Not quite the same things, but anyway. Right, number 5, the motorcycle champion, the last 4 consecutive titles, is of course Marc Marquez, who rides on Honda. Repsol Honda, you could have got more specific. I'm not going to argue with you being a motorsport round, but the answer is Marquez and Honda. Sporting venues, V for Victor, not menus, my bad. If you are watching the next play, I gave you this answer by accident in the second question, my bad. You'd be in New York, and the specific venue would have been Madison Square Garden. Madison Square Garden, just near Penn Station in New York. The name of the park or facility in New York that hosts the US Open tennis tournament is, of course, Flushing Meadows. And the biggest stadium at Flushing Meadows is the Arthur Ashe Stadium, which is the largest permanent tennis stadium in the world, seats just under 24,000 people. Arthur Ashe Stadium. In which city would you be if you were at Eden Gardens attending a sports event? You would be in Kolkata in India, and you would most likely be watching cricket. I say most likely because they do host football there also, but it's primarily a cricket stadium with, I think, well, Melbourne might be higher now, but one of the highest attendances ever in a cricket match in Kolkata at Eden Gardens. The iconic Rumble in the Jungle was fought in an African country. That country was Zaire, now the Democratic Republic of Congo. So you could have given me either. It's either the DRC or Zaire at the time. And the city was Kinshasa. Kinshasa was the city that hosted the Rumble in the Jungle. And your final question, the countries who hosted the first football and rugby World Cup finals. Coincidentally, they both won those tournaments as well. For football, it was Uruguay, 1930, and rugby was won by New Zealand in 1987. That Rugby World Cup was split between Australia and New Zealand, by the way. So if any of you are trying to be smart, Alex, but I did ask you who hosted the Rugby World Cup final, and that was held in Auckland, New Zealand. So that brings us to an end of answers for round 6, which means we are now in our final 2, and I am about to enter the category of obscure sports.
Ain't nobody got time for that. Ain't nobody got time for that. Ain't nobody got time for that. Ain't nobody got time. Ain't nobody got time. Ain't nobody got time for that.
These are the sports that you never pretty much see. We're back on the motorbiking. I'm not going to take the bait on that one, Kevin. Well done to some of you there. I'm not sure how you did. Okay, that must be your cumulative score, 35. Obscure sports. Right, so these are the not mainstream sports that I've asked you about so far, national sports of countries and that sort of thing. Question number 1. What sport would you be watching if you saw a victory by Oshi Dashi? What sport would you be watching if you saw a victory by Oshi Dashi? Oshi Dashi. Question number 2. Magnus Magnusson. Magnus Magnusson is a 4-time winner of the world's strongest man event. What nationality is he? And which country has won the event the most? It was first held in 1977 and every year since except one. And I want to know which country has won the event, World's Strongest Man, the most. And I want to know which nationality 4-time winner Magnus Magnusson is from. Right, what are we at now? Is that question 3? Question 3. For 3 points, 3 marks at stake. A number of countries play a game that is similar to bowls, where the object of the game is to either throw, slide, or roll an object as close as possible to a target. What is the name of this sport? It's the national sport, or one of the traditional sports in France, South Africa, and Scotland. I realize this is a vague question. But anyway, I kept it in because I think it's fun. For 3 points, a number of countries play a traditional game. That's key. It's a traditional game that is quite similar to bowls, where the purpose of the sport is to throw, slide, or roll an object as close as possible to a target, just like in lawn bowls. What I want to know is what is the name of this traditional sport or game in France? 1 point. South Africa, 1 point. And Scotland. And I'm not going to give you the clue around Scotland. Question 4, 1 point. Which world famous event, now hundreds of years old, takes place every year at Cooper's Hill and involves a double Gloucester, which is decorated with ribbons before the event? Which world famous event, now hundreds of years old, takes place every year at Cooper's Hill and involves a double Gloucester that is decorated with ribbons before the event? And your final question for obscure sports, Buzkashi, Buzkashi, Buzkashi is a sport in which teams of 10 horse-mounted riders attempt to place a beheaded goat or calf carcass in a goal. In which country is this the national sport? Buzkashi is a sport in which teams of 10 mounted horsemen attempt to place a beheaded goat or calf carcass in a goal. In which country is this the national sport? Who cares, Martin? Who cares? I have to confess, I was going to put a question here on one of the Gaelic sports, hurling or Gaelic football, as an obscure sport, but I work for World Rugby that's based in Dublin, and I know that there'd be many Irish listeners to this, and I didn't want to offend you by calling your sport an obscure sport. So D, that's the reason that it didn't feature here. Sorry. Your final round is the Olympics, and it's a bumper round where there are 17 points on offer. The Olympic Games. So, Olympic Games. Number 1. At the 2016 Olympic Games, who were the first, second, and last nations to enter the stadium during the Olympic opening ceremony? At the 2016 Olympic Games, who were the first, second, and last nations to enter the stadium during the Olympic opening ceremony? And I'm asking this, it's not random. There's always a very specific sequence in which countries come in, and I want you to work out in 2016, in those Olympic Games, who was first, who was second, and who would have come in last during the ceremony. Question 2, a little bit of Olympic history. Which is the only Olympic Games that took place on 2 different continents? And which 2 cities hosted it? Which is the only Olympic Games that took place on 2 different continents? And which 2 cities hosted it? The 7 is the one I just asked. Yeah, that's a, maybe it's a regular actually. If it is, Martin's in the money. Question 3. Name the next 4 Olympic Games host cities. The next 4 Olympic Games host cities. Summer and winter, not youth. I'm not interested in the youth Olympics here now. So only the proper ones, winter and summer. I want you to give me the names of the next 4 Olympic host cities. So there's 4 marks available there. There were 3 marks the previous 2 questions. Big scoring on offer here. Yeah, James, that's people have been saying maybe it'll be, we're committed to end of April for our lockdown, and then they're saying they're going to revisit some elements of it, but I'm not sure. The same actually for cigarettes. I feel for people who are reliant on those things. I mean, I know obviously it's not good to be, but the reality is some people are, and now they're locked down with no chance of getting them. So it's a recipe for some problems, unfortunately. Question 4. Which sports will make their debut appearance at the now 2021 Tokyo Olympic Games? Which sports make their debut appearance at the now 2021 Tokyo Olympic Games? There are 4 of them, so it's a 4-point question. I want you to give me the names of the 4 sports that will make their debut or first Olympic appearance in 2021 in Tokyo, assuming that happens, of course. And then your final question, question 40 for tonight, and it's a biggie. In the 2016 Olympic Games, there were 10 countries that won their first ever gold medal. So 10 countries won their first ever gold medal. I want you to give me the name of 3 of them, any 3. So you've got a 3 out of 10 chance of getting the points for 3 marks. There were 10 countries that won their first gold medals in 2016. Give me the names of 3 of those countries. If there are any requests, I know there were some hefty questions in that Olympic round, pop me a comment in the chat room over here, and I will respond to it and repeat a question. Other than that, that's it. So I'm going to give you guys another minute and a half, because there were some hefty ones, as I said, in the Olympic round, and then I'm going to give you the final rounds, final scores, sorry. Well, you can give yourself the final scores. I'll give you the final answers, 3rd time lucky. Question 2, Michael, of the Olympic round or of the obscure sports? I'll give you both. Of the obscure sports, I said to you that Magnus Magnusson was a 4-time winner of the world's strongest man event. I wanted to know what nationality he is, and I wanted to know which country has won that event most often. So for 2 marks, what nationality is Magnus Magnusson, and which country has won the world's strongest man title most often? And then question number 2 for the Olympics was, which is the only Olympic Games to take place on 2 different continents? And which city hosted it? Cities hosted it, obviously, more than one. Which is the only Olympic Games to take place on 2 different continents, and which cities hosted it? We will do another 30 seconds, and then I will sound the final gong and give you the answers to this, well, these last 2 rounds. So that is it. Let us give you some answers here. Yeah, thanks, Mark. I'm glad you enjoyed it. We will definitely do it again. I would like to actually do a general knowledge one, you know, get a bit of biology, politics, music, current affairs, that sort of stuff. And then I want to do another quiz, sports quiz. Maybe next weekend we can look at doing another. I think we might be in this situation for longer than we want. So for sure, we'll do it again. Quentin, yeah, same to you. Thanks. I see you're in Ireland. You have a South African surname. I'm not sure whether you're a displaced South African. Lovely place of the world to be displaced to, if so. And then, John, the questions and answers available. Yeah, I will. I suppose I could type something up, but this will obviously be on YouTube permanently. So I'll put a little thing in the description about like exactly what minute and second each round begins, and then you can cut out all the junk of me talking nonsense in between. Speaking of talking nonsense, let me get to the answers here and stop myself. Question number 1. I know, James, I work from Ireland, but I'm going to disgrace myself like I did the one time I had to get Guinness for my mates. What sport would you be watching if you saw victory by Oshi Dashi? That would be sumo wrestling. It's a move. It's a sumo wrestling move where you aggressively push your opponent backwards, I think. The Rugby World Cup was in Japan last year, and I desperately wanted to go see sumo wrestling, but the seasons didn't overlap, so I did not. Question number 2. Magnus Magnusson is a 4-time winner. He is from Iceland. The name would have given you a degree of a clue there. And the country that has won the event the most is not Iceland. They have got a rich history. They've won it 9 times, but the USA has won it 4 times. So that is the correct answer, USA. Next question for 3 points. A number of countries play games similar to bowls. Luckily, it was the answer. The game in France is called either bowls or pétanque. So I'll give you the point for either bowls or pétanque. In South Africa, that sport where the objective, the traditional sport where you're trying to throw something as close as possible to a target, is called yukske, because each of those objects is called a ske. And Scotland, that sport, I gave you a hint with the question when I said slide. The answer is in fact curling. I know it's not a traditional Scottish game now. I was going to give you a clue that it's on ice, but the answer to that one was in fact curling. Which 100-year-old world-famous event takes place on Cooper's Hill involving a double Gloucester? Double Gloucester being a type of cheese, a wheel of cheese. They roll that down the hill and people chase after it. And so it is the cheese rolling event. Apparently the cheese gets to speeds of 100 k's an hour, so nobody ever beats it. Final question for obscure sports. Buzkashi is a sport in which teams of 10 riders attempt to place a beheaded goat or calf carcass in a goal. In which country is this the national sport? I only know this because I was once late night watching some old Channel movies thing, and Rambo came on. And one of the Rambo movies took place in Afghanistan. And he played this game with the local tribesmen. So the answer is Afghanistan. Apparently, they soak the goat in cold water to toughen it up before the game for a day. Sounds nasty. Right, and then your last one, Olympic Games. Let's get to this. For 3 points, I wanted to know first, second, and last. The first nation to enter the stadium is always Greece because of the 1896 Olympics. They were the first ever hosts, and so traditionally they come in first. The last country to come in, we'll go there, is the host. And so that would have been in 2016, Brazil. So Greece and Brazil bookend the ceremony. The second country that comes in is done in alphabetical order of the host nation. So in 2016, it would have been in Portuguese, and the answer is Afghanistan again. Second appearance for that country. And there's some quirky things. So for instance, South Africa comes in third because Afrique du Sud is, or I'm not sure what it is in Portuguese, but it's similar. Paris will be there. Whereas when it's in London, we come in near the back because it's S, South Africa. So there you go. So alphabetical order, either side of Greece and Brazil. Which is the only Olympic Games to take place on 2 different continents? 1956. What happened was it was awarded to Melbourne, Australia, and they had very strict quarantine requirements around horses. The horse had to be quarantined for 6 months before it could come into the country. So they said, well, we're not doing that. And so what happened was they held the equestrian events in Stockholm. And so the Stockholm events were actually held in June 1956. And then 5 months later, in November, the Melbourne Olympics took place. So the answer is 1956, Melbourne and Stockholm were the hosts. The next 4 Olympic events. Tokyo, 2021 now, is the next one. That's followed by the Winter Olympics in 2022, which will be held in Beijing. The Summer Olympics in 2024 are being held in Paris, France. And the Winter Olympics of 2026 are going to be held in Milan, jointly with Cortina. So those are your 4 answers: Tokyo, Beijing, Paris, Milan. Which sports made their debut appearance at the, will make their debut appearance at the now 2021 Tokyo Olympic Games? Surfing, skateboarding, sport climbing, and karate are the 4 sports. Baseball and softball are also being included, coming back in, but it's not their first time. They used to be in the Olympics until they were taken out, and now they are being added back in. So the answers were surfing, skateboarding, climbing, and karate. And then your final question, which was for 3 points, countries that won their first gold medals in 2016. I'm going to list the 10 for you, so you can pick any 3 from this list. Hopefully you got them. Bahrain won a steeplechase medal. The woman who is almost certainly, she is a doper. She was almost certainly won that with the aid of some drugs, as you've discovered tonight earlier, the ones you now know about. Fiji won the men's sevens, first gold medal. Kuwait, although their guy was competing as an independent. Ivory Coast won a taekwondo medal. Kosovo won a judo medal. Puerto Rico won the women's tennis title, which was a huge upset. Monica Puig was the athlete's name. Singapore won a swimming medal. Their guy beat Chad Leclos, our South African, in the butterfly to win gold. Tajikistan for hammer throw, and Vietnam for shooting. So those were your 10. Bahrain, Fiji, Kuwait, Jordan. I think I might have missed that first time. Jordan, Kosovo, Puerto Rico, Singapore, Tajikistan, Vietnam. Any 3 would have got you those points. And that is a wrap. That's it, folks. That's the sports quiz, edition 1, version 1, whatever you want to call it, out the way. I don't even know how many marks that was for. It's 100. I don't know. There could be 100 marks there. I hope that you enjoyed it. We definitely will do this again. I think I'd love to hit 4 figures. I think we hit about 200 at peak here. Tell your friends. Let's get some Zoom and Skype and whatever else. And we'll do this again, same time next week. Another sports one. And maybe we'll do a general knowledge one as well, sometime in the middle of the week. So please join me then. Until then, stay safe. listen to the rules and do what needs to be done. Do your bit for social distancing, and see you all next week. Ciao.